You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
T-Wolves get blown out from start to finish in Cleveland, despite 44 more points from Anthony Edwards. Final score versus the Cavs tonight, 128-107. What's going on? Back in the lab, back at it. Another T-Wolves postcast episode right here on the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. Your team every day. Jack Borman with me as always. Give him a follow on X at JRBorman13. Jack, lots to get into, including A-Rod and Laurie. They get it done. They complete the sale to buy the Minnesota Timberwolves. Plus, Ant scores 44 more points. He continues to stay hot. But first, quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by Game Time. Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so Wolves coming in on a heater, looking for their fourth straight win. Cavs, though, even hotter, right? Winners of 6 of their last 7, second best record in the league, first in the East right now. And I got to tell you, Jack, man, like, I get it now. Watching them up close and personal for 2.5 hours, I know it's just one game, but it made me realize just how dangerous this team really is. Of course, it didn't help the Wolves got off to like this historically bad start, which we'll talk about, 0 for 16 to start the game, 2 for 21 to follow that up. They were down 18 after the first quarter, 22 at halftime. That lead was just too much. Couldn't make a stop defensively when they needed to. Ant tried his best, 44 more points. Again, we'll touch on that later on as well. But final score, 128-107. Wolves dropped to 30 and 24. Big picture, real quick, 30, 60-second snapshot. This game for me, Jack, like in a nutshell, kind of the epitome of what this season has been for this team. Hot and cold. When it's good, it's great, just like the past 3 games. When it's bad, things look ugly at times. So what's a loss like this mean big picture? Like, does it tell you they aren't even close to the elite, kind of the best of the best category with those stud teams at the top? Like, what's the big takeaway, big, broad, aerial view picture here first?
Yeah, I mean, they haven't beaten any of the big teams at the top. I think they're 0-7 now against teams that have the best records in the league, courtesy of our guy Ryan Eichten on Twitter tonight. And I think that's obviously important to remember too, that the Timberwolves are still down, 2 pretty important offensive pieces, and Randall DiVincenzo and Connelly was out tonight again with that right index finger sprain. I think again for this team, it's just it's not necessarily about anything other than, for me right now, I think when they look their worst is when their offense struggles for prolonged stretches and they have really long periods of being stuck in the mud. And again tonight, I mean, you just had an all-time bad start to this game, and I'm not saying that it's not hyperbole. And this team started 0 of 16 from the floor, tied the 76ers in 2004 for, I believe, the longest or most missed shots to start a game. Their first point came at the 4:56 mark of the first quarter. They went scoreless for the first 7 minutes, 4 seconds.
And that was a Rudy Gobert free throw, right?
It was.
When he went 1 for 2, he couldn't even make both, right? Okay, so it's
the first field goal they make at the 2:55 mark. 9 minutes and 5 seconds into the game was an Anthony Edwards 3. In the first quarter, the Wolves go 2 for 21, 1 of 10 from 2, 1 of 11 from 3. They did make 7 of their 8 free throws. They had 5 turnovers for 4 Cavaliers points. They lost 24-2 in the paint. They allowed 6 offensive rebounds for 8 second chance points. And at one point, Cleveland had twice as many offensive rebounds, 6, as Minnesota had points, 3. They just got absolutely throttled by Evan Mobley and Jared Allen in the paint in that first quarter. And I just thought overall in that first quarter at the start of everything, they had really good process. They created a lot of pretty open shots, and they were just missing good looks. And then I think progressively with each added miss, it just kind of became, all right, we're starting to feel the weight of, okay, we just got to make one and then go from there. And I think that kind of led to some pretty poor shot selection. And then another downstream impact of that was they just let it impact their defensive effort on the other end of the floor. And you can't have nights when you're struggling to, really stay in it defensively against, two of the best guards in the league, and surely one of the best backcourts in the league, and Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, who are both going to be in San Francisco this weekend for the All-Star game. So just really tough when you let their backcourt get into it the way they did, and then certainly when you let their front court, which is no slouch either, really impose their will and just kind of set a really physical and dominant tone early in the game.
Yeah, good breakdown there. Yeah, it was ugly, man. It was actually very frustrating sitting on the couch watching this one for sure. We'll get back to the game at hand, obviously. First, let's kind of tackle the A topic, lighten the mood here a little bit. The approval of the team sale, Glenn to A-Rod and Lori. Kind of fill us in. Like, I don't know a lot of details. Fill us in on kind of everything we should know just to be able to speak about this, like the who, what, where, when, why, any big notes or takeaways from, the news that unfolded today. Ownership is so huge, Jack. Like, you hear it in every sport. Sometimes it gets maybe glossed over a little bit, but it truly does all start at the top with the owners for all these teams. You see it, with the Polads and the Twins, like all the frustration. Some guys aren't willing to open up their checkbooks as much as others. Even outside of just the money aspect, sometimes you need good owners who hire the right GMs, who then hire the right head coaches to run things the right way, obviously. So, like, what are we getting with A-Rod and Lori that maybe we haven't had with Glenn Taylor the last, 3 decades or so?
Yeah, I think it's just a long-term commitment to excellence and sustainable excellence. I think this is a tandem that really want to bring championships to Minnesota. And I think that, really since they've gotten involved in the organization as minority partners, that's when, the Timberwolves have really started to really crescendo up here and start to, drag themselves out of the bottom barrel of professional sports franchises in North American sports. And I think, really quick note. So they do still have to complete the sale. So this arbitration ruling, which was 2-1 in favor of A-Rod and Lori, from here, they'll, have to submit the final payment, which Mark Lori has said several times that he has ready to go. And then from there, they'll have to be approved by the NBA Board of Governors. I think they need at least 24 of 30 votes there, which they should be able to get.
Did you ever watch Succession, the HBO show? I'm picturing the big board meeting, trying to get the votes, man. Trying to get the votes, dude. Yeah, that's great.
Of course. No eldest boy in the Taylor family to take over.
There you go.
But yeah, so they'll need to get Board of Governor approval, and it's been, Shams Charania of ESPN reported that A-Rod and Lori have been meeting with several different owners from across the league over the last few months in advance of this coming. And Dane Moore reported this afternoon that the Board of Governors vote should not be an obstacle, and that, he expects that they will approve A-Rod and Lori once again, because they have already approved them once to become minority partners. So A-Rod and Lori released a statement. Finch also released a statement, which I think is kind of important here, that I'm going to read in its entirety just because I think it's important for people to hear from Finch. Finch said, quote, "I've had a great relationship with all 3 owners. I've been super blessed to work here, and they've been nothing but supportive in all of their own individual ways and together at times. So I'll wait and see when it is official, etc. But it hasn't affected our basketball abilities, which is the most important thing. And all the ownership parties have been super mindful of that. It's been a long process with a lot of angst on both sides. So the resolution of it is overall good for the club," is what Finch said. And I think that's important to kind of keep in mind here, that particularly the last thing of what he said is the angst on both sides of this thing. Like, there's been kind of a split in the Timberwolves organization in terms of, the people that Glenn hired versus the people that A-Rod and Lori brought in. And then, a lot of the people on the basketball side are people that A-Rod and Lori brought in, especially in the front office. Chris Finch certainly was a guy that was here before, Tim Connelly was, and all of Chris Finch's staff for the most part was here before Tim Connelly, but a lot of the people in the front office have joined since then. And there's been a lot of people on the business side of things who were Glenn Taylor hires. And so I just think for everyone working in the organization about the business and the basketball side, just having clarity and certainty are really important. I think it just makes it easier to know, or to function as a group when you kind of know what the future holds, you know whose vision you're contributing towards. Because right now, I think it's kind of hard to say that there's a shared vision between the Taylor side of things and the A-Rod and Laurie side of things. So I think that'll just create less toxicity. And for as much as people wanted to say that, and Finch himself said, that it didn't trickle down and impact the basketball side of things, I think it certainly did. I think the vibes in the early part of the season when things were not going well and things were pretty combative behind the scenes, that was not pretty. And it's just hard to, I think, go out there and do everything you're supposed to do from, Connelly on down to guys on the floor when you know that that's going on. And I think, moving forward, we'll see what happens in terms of A-Rod and Laurie getting more of their people in the organization. So it's hard to project at this point exactly what that will mean. But, I think we can all certainly hope that it'll clear the way for Kevin Garnett, who has been a vocal opponent of Glenn Taylor to finally get his jersey retired and come back into the organization in some capacity. There's obviously been reports, John Krasinski of The Athletic over the summer reported that there's plans for a new privately funded arena, and that Michael Bloomberg joined the ownership group as part of an effort to kind of push that forward. And so who knows? And then, with A-Rod and Laurie, a huge part of, A-Rod's kind of ethos at the start of all this was that, he was a professional athlete and he knows kind of what you need to have as an athlete in order to be successful, and the things that organizations need to provide their athletes with, from, nutrition, training, recovery, all that sort of good stuff in the practice facility. So it would not surprise me if there's some, improvements that they try to make to the practice facilities. And it's important to note that both the Timberwolves and the Lynx use the same practice facility at Mayo Clinic Square. So, whatever improvements they'd be making for the Timberwolves, they'd also be making for the Lynx. And then I think the most important thing, obviously, too, is just that they're going to consistently be a team that's willing to go into the luxury tax to field a super competitive team around Anthony Edwards as he enters his prime here in the next 4 or 5 years or so, which is going to be super important. So, I think, this could all be done and dusted potentially by the end of next month when, the Board of Governors, after the Board of Governors meets and votes and sale transaction is approved. But you never really know until it's officially official. So we'll see what happens. But certainly, in the aggregate, a great day for Minnesota Timberwolves fans, hoping that this team will be competitive for a long, long time around Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like just getting KG involved would be worth it alone. If they didn't do anything else, if you just got KG involved, I think the fans would be happy. But you brought up a lot of great points. And like A-Rod, too, I love how you said he's an athlete. He knows what it takes. Not just an athlete, though. I mean, one of the highest end caliber athletes in his sport who also won a championship. So he knows not only just the day-to-day, but what it takes to win a championship, too, and what you got to obviously build from the ground floor as well. Go ahead.
For sure. And that last comment from Jaden, too, is obviously an important note. Kind of goes without saying that Tim Connelly was hired by A-Rod and Laurie, and, he signed a 1-year contract last offseason to kind of kick that can down the road to see what would happen with the ownership decision. So I would imagine, too, that he'll receive a new contract once the dust settles, presuming that he still wants to be here and see this thing through and help build around Ant.
Yeah, as he should, right? Like he should be. I mean, where are you at with Tim Connelly? Just kind of 1 to 10, love him, like him?
I love Tim.
Me too.
Tim, okay. I mean, first and foremost, he's an awesome dude. Every single game, he is back in the back hallway greeting all the players as soon as they come off the floor into the tunnel. Super visible. All the guys speak super highly of him. I mean, all the interactions I've had with him, he's a wonderful guy, and he's made a lot of great moves for this Timberwolves team. I mean, obviously the cat trade, we'll see, but the Gobert trade obviously helped get them into the playoffs and get them to the Western Conference Finals last year. Mm-hmm. You signed Nas to a long-term extension. You signed Jane to a long-term extension. You've made great moves on the margins between the Mike Conley and Nickeil Alexander-Walker plus 3 second-round picks. That the TJ Shannon draft selection, that the Rob Dillingham trade was super shrewd and something that'll certainly be fun to follow for the future. And I've got nothing but positive things to say about Tim Connelly, especially compared to to some of his predecessors, as we've grown up here. But
I'm
no
with you. Same page, man.
Timberwolves fans shouldn't want him to be here long term.
100%. I'm with you. Same page. I think everybody's in agreement as well. Like, when's the last time we've been to the Western Conference Finals? Are you kidding me? Proof's in the pudding, man. Like, what he's doing, whether you hated the Rudy trade like a lot of people did or not. I mean, you just look at the complete body of work. They're not all going to be hits. They're not all going to be doubles or home runs, but the complete body of work, what he's done since he's taken over, man. How could you not want him back for the long haul? Good breakdown there. Plenty more deep dive from this one. Anthony Edwards, 44 more points tonight. But what went wrong for everybody else? That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by FanDuel. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Right now, FanDuel's still giving you a chance at a huge return, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you win your first $5 wager. Why I love FanDuel? When you get the hunch in the middle of the game, you can go check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Again, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you win your first $5 wager. Go check it all out over at FanDuel.com. Get into some NBA future action while you're there. Naz Reid, 6 Man of the Year odds, still sitting at 5-1. It's all sitting up over at FanDuel.com. Again, check it all out over at FanDuel.com and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you win your first $5 wager. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, Anthony Edwards, man, the Ant-Man, he is en fuego this last week. Another 44-point night. Like 5 points shy of tying the most points in a 3-game span in like NBA history. I think Jim Pete said tonight in the broadcast. Problem was, like you already touched on, historically bad start. 0 for 16, 2 for 21, and that was just to get things going. That was a deficit even Ant couldn't help them crawl back from. Start with the game first, then we'll talk about Ant and his 44 points. Did this game remind you of any other games from earlier in the season? And also, too, like, what were you most frustrated with? The historically bad start offensively, couldn't buy a bucket, or the fact every time they would heat up and score some points, they just never could make a stop or two, at least I'll say, defensively when they needed a couple the most. That was tough to watch in the second half.
Yeah, it reminded me of that Detroit game where Ant had 50 and no one else could get anything going, and it was just a horrible start to the game. And then Wolves kind of climbed into it and then would get it to 8 or 9, but couldn't really chip it closer than that. And this certainly felt a lot like that, other than, I think it just felt like this game was over a lot sooner than that one. Mm-hmm. But again, I think Ant got to 40 points in that Pistons game before anyone else got to 10. In this game, Ant got to 30 before anyone else got to 10. And yeah, like you said, Anthony Edwards, first player in Timberwolves history to have games of 40 points in 3 straight games. So super cool for him to be able to do that. And yeah, I think again for Ant in specifics, like he made 10 shots in a row, bridging the second and third quarters, including 5 threes, did it at all 3 levels, pull up threes, blow bys and pick and rolls, blow bys off the catch. The Cavs are switching everything. So he was able to post up Garland and some of the smaller guards, Ty Jerome, on the Cavs and score that way. And then, was able to knock down catch and shoot shots as well. But I think sometimes when Ant gets on those heaters, he kind of forgets about his teammates that are out there on the floor, and that can lead to some tunnel vision turnovers and other guys getting out of rhythm. And so in this game, Ant only had 1 assist, but he had 7 turnovers, which was probably the worst game of his season from a playmaking perspective. But
and the Wolves only had 15 turnovers, right? So he had almost half their turnovers, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And he certainly had the ball in his hands more than anyone else, but still, I think he's got to be better with the ball. I don't really understand, or I don't really think that you can say in any game that 7 turnovers is acceptable. And for Ant, again, it's just the consistency factor as a playmaker that he's got to be better with. But I think you got to give Ant a lot of credit for really digging in and competing super hard and setting a tone that I think allowed some of his other teammates to get in the game and compete with him and just make this a little bit of a game for parts of that second and third quarter and not make this just a complete embarrassment, losing by 40 points or 50 points. So yeah, I think for Ant specifically, again, really good to see him get to the free throw line and continue to keep his foot on the gas. And, again, another really solid game of him blending 3-point shooting with getting to the rim and then, layering in some other elements of his scoring bag, like getting into the post, which is something we saw him do more down the stretch last season. And is something I'd like to see him do more of, especially against defenses like Cleveland's that are going to be switching a ton. And early in this game, I think what contributed to that problem is Cleveland was switching everything for the most part, 1 through 4. They were leaving Allen on Gobert, but outside of that, they're switching a ton, led to a lot of isolation basketball. And when that starts to happen, the ball isn't moving as much. I think it's tougher for guys like Naz Reid to find a rhythm. He only had 10 points on 4 of 12 shooting. Jaden McDaniels had 10 points on only 8 shots, which, he's got to do a better job of hunting shots, especially considering him coming off of a career high 30 points. And then, off the bench, before this game got out of hand and we were into garbage time, the bench really didn't offer a whole lot for the Wolves. So I think, again, a really good effort from Anthony Edwards to put up 44 on a night where no one else had it. But it was just, again, that tone in the first quarter was really bad. And I think Rudy Gobert had a lot to do with that. It's normally not something that we say with Rudy, but it was a really bad game from him. I thought he had 2 bad turnovers in the first quarter, trying to do too much with the ball. And then Allen and Mobley were just a 2-man wrecking crew on the offensive glass in the first quarter. Those 2 guys had 5 offensive rebounds between the 2 of them. And they were pretty much able to do whatever they wanted to inside. And I think just feasted whenever Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell were able to get past the first line of the defense. And I think, you saw that in the second quarter too, when Jaden McDaniels picked up his 3rd foul. Those 2 guys really started to get downhill, and Naz or, other help defenders would have to step up, and then it would leave bigs wide open in the dunker spot for easy dump offs. And, that was really a reason why, despite Ant going on this crazy heater, the Wolves weren't able to get it much closer than 15 points, which was kind of a bummer. But yeah, just a really, really tough effort, or tough night from pretty much everyone that was not named Anthony Edwards. And hopefully they can turn it around on Wednesday.
Is there anything to learn, or any worthwhile takeaways after a loss like that? Like something you can learn from or take with you in the playoffs? Let's just say that they don't match up well against, when it comes to a team like the Cavs and how they're built and how they like to beat you. I just think of those offensive boards early on, those paint points, how tough they are defensively inside in the paint, and think to myself, okay, maybe you don't want to see a team built like that in a best-of-7 series, perhaps, come playoff time. Any noteworthy takeaways from a game like this?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily. I mean, the Timberwolves have been really good in the paint of late, and they've actually been pretty good rebounding the ball, especially in the offensive end of the floor. But I think you'll have Julius Randle back, so he's just another big man that you can have out there. I think that will compete on the glass and can add some edge and physicality to you that they're lacking a little bit right now. And I think again, it just speaks to the Timberwolves just need to do a better job of moving the ball when things aren't going right for them offensively. I think sometimes they get too bogged down into playing isolation basketball, specifically with Ant and Naz, and they try to do too much with it, do it all themselves, take tough shots early in the shot clock that just kind of feed and gnaw, to be honest, too. Take shots too early in the shot clock that result in easy opportunities for the other team to get out and run and transition and just kind of avalanche affect it. So, I just think you got to keep the ball moving. You got to try to inject more pace into the game, try to run more off of stops when you can, and just get back. There were too many times where they got beat off of makes, especially too, which was disappointing to see, especially considering that, Timberwolves team 27th in the league in the last 5 in fast break differential coming into this game. And I think they lost it again tonight, or they did win tonight, but I think a lot of that was in garbage time. But yeah.
A couple minutes left. Let's talk about this Bucks game Wednesday night. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode also brought to us by BetterHelp. You know, when your schedule, it gets packed with work projects and more. It's so easy to let your priorities start to slip, even when we know what makes us happy. But when you feel like you got no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy, more important than ever. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, maybe it's time to give BetterHelp a try. Entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. So simple. All you got to do, fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched up with the licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Go visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. You're getting 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, couple minutes left here real quick. Bucks up next, Wednesday night. No Greek Freak. One of two remaining games before the All-Star break as well. What areas do you want to see them bounce back in a big way versus the Bucks after tonight's loss? And you know, also without the Greek Freak, what is kind of the blueprint for success stopping Damian Lillard and company?
Yeah, I think you just got to be really disciplined in the pick and roll game. You know, Dame's a guy that super opportunistic up there, and Jaden McDaniels is certainly going to have his hands full with him. And I think you just got to, you know, try to keep Dame away from the middle of the floor. I think when he gets to the middle of the floor, he's awesome at kicking the ball out, getting into the floater range, scoring, can do basically whatever he wants. I mean, he had like 45 points in their last game, and he's got 29 on 9 of 15 shooting in 32 minutes so far tonight in their game against Golden State. The Bucks are down 8 right now. But yeah, I think, you know, if you can stop Damian Lillard, I think you'll have no problem winning this game. And I think the Bucks are going to want to try to turn this game into a shootout. And I think if you can shut off Damian Lillard's water and force guys like Gary Trent and Bobby Portis, you know, old friend Taurean Prince to beat you, I think you're going to be in a good spot. And Kyle Kuzma is on their team now. He got traded for Chris Middleton and a young player, and I think maybe a first round pick at the trade deadline. So they also picked up Kevin Porter Jr., another guy who can give you some scoring off the bench. So I think, yeah, if you can slow down Damian Lillard, you'll be just fine. But I think for the Wolves too, one thing I'd like to, or a couple of notes, and I should say they won't have Giannis. Giannis will be out with a calf injury, so that's an important thing. But for the Wolves, I think I'd like to see them continue to play with force and get inside. Tonight was their 4th straight game with at least 24 made free throw attempts, which is the longest active streak in the league. And for context, the reason why 24 is the number is because that's the number of free throw attempts that the Grizzlies shoot per game, and that's the best in the league. So if the Wolves can continue to get downhill, play physical, and you know, kind of make defenses pay for closing out a little hard to them on 3-point shooting, I think that'll be important, because the Wolves have struggled to score in from 2-point range, especially on plays that aren't, dunks in transition or drop off dunks for Rudy Gobert. So I think, you know, those two things are going to be really important. And then one other thing I'd kind of keep my eye on is if we do get into a situation where we would be looking for Luka Garza minutes like we have the last couple of weeks here, it would not surprise me if Chris Finch went to Leonard Miller in those spots. I thought it was pretty telling that Luka Garza played 3 minutes in this game. He got absolutely cooked. The Cavs were playing a 3-2 zone. He got in behind it, got to the free throw line, missed both of his free throws, and then on the other end of the floor was horribly out of position in pick and roll, and then fouled. I think it was Evan Mobley for an and one, and then was promptly taken out of the game after missing a couple more shots. So
misses both free throw attempts too up there.
Yeah. And so I just think that the fact that he wasn't out there at the end of the game when all the reserves were in was pretty telling. Right. And Leonard Miller looked pretty good in those minutes. I mean, he only played for, a handful of minutes, but had 4 points, had a nice bucket, got to the free throw line, had a nice block and a 3-point shot. And then, when he gets the ball off the rim and is able to rebound and then grab and go, I think he's a guy that could, again, inject some pace into the game and play really well with guys like Jaden McDaniels, Jalen Clark, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. So, who knows what'll happen, but I think if Chris Finch is going to keep going to this youth movement, especially against a Cavs bench a a Bucks bench where the biggest guy that's going to be coming off the bench for them probably is Bobby Portis, who's like 6'9", 6'10". I think it could certainly be an opportunity for Leonard Miller to see a few minutes instead of Luka Garza, because what Luka Garza has been giving him has just not been super helpful.
Does that worry you, just as far as like the center depth, I guess, just for the rest of the season, or big picture long term for next year and beyond even? Does that worry you at all that Garza has clearly not developed into maybe even just the backup we kind of hoped he could turn into after a couple more years down in Iowa?
No, I don't think it concerns me long term at all, because there's certainly mechanisms that they have available to him to be able to address that in the offseason. And if they don't end up moving that first round pick, if that Detroit pick ends up conveying, then I would anticipate that's probably where they would make a selection. But again, I mean, there's going to be able to find bigs in free agency that you'll be able to get for, a veteran minimum or something, less than the mid-level exception that they'll be able to use. So yeah, I think for the rest of the season, it's certainly concerning. And I thought that was why you might see Nickeil Alexander-Walker get moved is, you've got Jalen Clark, you've got TJ Shannon behind him. You're hoping that Dante DiVincenzo is going to come back, that Mike Conley is going to be able to stay healthy. Yep. So maybe you try to look to trade in, or swap out Nickeil Alexander-Walker for a big guy. And that says nothing about Nickeil Alexander-Walker's ability. It's just more of a, what do you need more right now?
Too many cooks in the kitchen. Yeah. About value.
Yeah, for sure. And Nickeil, yeah. So, but again, we'll see. And the hope obviously is that Julius Randle can come back and be healthy and continue to pick up where he left off, playing super impactful basketball, but right before he got hurt.
Well said. Good breakdown per usual. T-Wolves 3-game win streak is snapped after that historically bad start in the first quarter. Final score versus the Cavs, 128-107. Wolves dropped to 30-24 on the year, still 6 games above 500. As always, huge shout out to all the everydayers that always make us your first listen. All you guys coming in the chat with us from game to game and venting when needed. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and go follow Jack. He's on X at Borman 13. He's live from the Target Center during almost every home game. You going to be there Wednesday night versus the Bucks, 7 p.m. tip-off?
I sure will.
Love it. All right, we'll catch you same time, same place right here. But until then,